Hello, Winnipeg Jets fans. It is officially Draft Lotto Day, or I should say it was yesterday. We'll talk about where the Jets have now ranked in their quest to get a brand new hot prospect, and we'll also update you on the latest Stanley Cup playoff action, all coming right up on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for choosing to make Locked On Jets your first listen of the day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. We've got audio and video versions of this podcast available for you, so you can take us on the go. You can listen to us or watch us at home. Whatever you need from us, we've got you covered. I am your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. On tonight's episode, like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to discuss the the draft lotto implications for the Jets because Winnipeg obviously did not win a lottery pick, but that doesn't mean that the Jets are not going to walk away with a pretty decent prospect. We'll talk about what what the actual order was and who might be benefiting the most from this draft lotto, and then also talk about later an update on the latest Stanley Cup playoff standings and what has happened over the last day or so. But let's dive into the NHL 2022 Draft Lottery. So this year, we saw the Montreal Canadiens come in first, which is obviously a major win for this Habs franchise. Montreal has really struggled over the past couple of years. Despite finding their way to a Stanley Cup final, you probably knew it wasn't all that legitimate. I think that there were a lot of conditions when they made their cup run that just in a normal season would never happen. Obviously, the North Division was not exactly something that you would expect to see happen again, and it gave Montreal probably the easiest path to a cup finals that a team has had in ages. So, no disrespect to the Habs, but I think what we've seen over the past year or two with them is a lot more of what you would actually expect with this team. They're just not that good, and I think at a very deep level, they're kind of dysfunctional and they need a refresh. Winning first overall, that's a really good way to kickstart your rebuild. If you're looking for a brand new opportunity to start over, grab a top end prospect like Shane Wright or Logan Cooley, whoever they're really interested in at number one overall. I mean, this is just a really good opportunity. I feel like Wright is the very obvious choice, but I'm sure that there's at least one or two people out there who are going to have some differing opinion. We'll dive into the draft class later on as we approach the offseason. I feel like we don't need to talk about it right now, but we'll talk about it as we approach the draft and what you might expect with the Jets. Coming in second place, though, we've got the New Jersey Devils, which I think their fans are going to be thrilled with. This is obviously a major win for the team. The Devils kind of feel like they're not that far off from being like really decent. It's just that they need a few more pieces and honestly just a goaltender to kind of get them over the hump. Like the Jets, I think that they have some coaching issues as well that they need to sort out. But again, I think the Devils, when it comes to teams that are kind of more on the fringes, they're not that bad. I think that they have some real promise, and I think that there's a genuinely decent squad there with some really good underappreciated talent. I'm a big fan of Nico Hischier. Jack Hughes has also really shown well recently. I do think that their defense probably, they would have wished a few of their other prospects to really pan out, but for now, they've got third overall or second overall. I'm sure they are thrilled. Coming in at third overall, unfortunately, is the Arizona Coyotes. Uh, for me, I feel like the Yotes are getting rewarded for what I feel is mismanagement. It's not really the fault of the players or a lot of the staff, but the overall team ownership structure and what has happened with this team over the past few years. I just feel like it's really unacceptable. And the fact that the NHL has a format where, the worst teams can consistently end up getting lottery picks and stuff to then just not really improve at all. I don't love that. I don't want to say that there's a format out there that doesn't have its drawbacks, right? But I think the draft lotto in particular, I've always had a feeling like if you're a team that is as bad as a lot of these squads are, and you also look at how bad a lot of the management teams are, you're just giving them the keys to another top prospect that a team is probably going to ruin. So I just don't know how I feel about that. The Locked On Yotes podcast has given some really good thoughts on the state of the team and the future. So I highly recommend that you go listen to Robin and get her thoughts on the whole process. But, in the meantime, we're going to keep moving on down the rankings. Coming in at fourth overall, we've got the Seattle Kraken. Seattle had a miserable season. This draft pick is probably going to be a nice little reprieve, but not enough to cover a lot of the issues with the roster construction and just the generally poor performance. They have like no scoring depth, and I think that became very obvious as the season wore on. After that, we've got the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers are a disaster, and I don't really know what has gone wrong with this team. I've just seen like the score lines and stuff coming out of Philly. As bad as the Jets have been, I don't know if they've even approached a level of hockey that the Flyers have put out. So, yeah, Philadelphia fans, I'm praying for you. I hope you get a decent prospect because, kind of like the Kraken, you guys have a lot to work on. The Columbus Blue Jackets came in at sixth, pretty respectable, rebuilding franchise, trying to find its way. Some promising young players mixed with some savvy veterans, but again, needing a little bit of a talent injection to kind of kickstart things and hopefully start building around Patrick Laine as well as some of the other really great prospects that they've got filtering in. Now, coming in at seventh, it's the Ottawa Senators, man. Kind of like the Yotes. Again, another franchise that I feel like has been spinning its wheels. Uh, the management and ownership teams are pretty poor. It's just, it really is frustrating to see the same names consistently pop up in the list. Edmonton used to be a team that ended up on the top of the draft pick list all the time. The Jets, frankly, have had, their fair share recently of getting top 10 picks. It's just not a good place to be. And for the fact that these teams don't often find themselves out of it, it's, on the one hand, you do understand because like the timetable of a prospect joining an NHL team is often very it's non-linear, right? So there's a lot that has to happen and they actually have to pan out. But by the same token, you're also not seeing enough of an impact from previous drafts where some of these players really should have been ideally making it in the big game and having the level of impact you would expect. And you find out instead they just really haven't amounted to much, and the team itself hasn't really done anything with them. So kind of frustrating. But the teams after this, I think, really are more likely to do better with the drafting and the prospects that they bring in. At eighth overall, you've got Detroit. I think the Red Wings have done a good job kickstarting their rebuild, and they seemingly play pretty decent hockey. So not bad. Buffalo Sabres, who even knows with them, they're coming in at ninth overall. The Sabres are the Sabres. There's always been dysfunction around this team, and I don't even know what you expect of them, but probably nothing good. At 10th overall, we've got the Anaheim Ducks. Anaheim had a really strong start to this season, kind of fell off. But there's some serious potential there, and I think the team has a brighter future than you would expect with some of the other squads. At 11th, we've got the San Jose Sharks. I'm sure that they're happy to add another top 15 pick. They are starting to show real signs of making progress in developing some of their young players and making sure that their veterans retain interest in the project. Tomas Hertl resigning was a really big deal. And while this team definitely still has some very obvious gaps like, goaltending, the defense is getting older, and the forward unit also probably needs a few refreshers, this is a good chance for them to start restocking the prospect cupboard and really pushing things forward. At 12th overall, we've also got Columbus again. I don't know if the first one or the second one is a pick that was traded, but whatever the case is, I'm kind of leaning more towards the first pick being the one that was traded, but I don't even remember. But whatever the case is, they've got two first rounders in a pretty decent draft. I'm sure that they're happy getting to pick twice in the top 15. The team after them, though, can't really be happy. The New York Islanders are at 13th overall. I'm sure that they're very disappointed. They were hoping to get a lottery windfall, and in light of everything that's happened with the team recently, the fan base really could have used it. But instead, they're just one ahead of the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets are at 14th. This is a good pick. I always trust Winnipeg's drafting process when it comes to their recent first round escapades. I think that they've done a good job. We'll talk about who they might be able to get on a future episode. I think that they have a lot of options. I'm really hoping Brad Lambert is available, but I know that that's basically a pipe dream unless something crazy happens. But 14th overall, let's bring in someone really cool and maybe solidify a future position for the Jets. After that, you've got Vancouver, and then again the Buffalo Sabres. Probably another Sabres pick that was either dealt or acquired in some kind of a trade. Um, but yeah, the Jets, they didn't win a lottery pick, and that's fine. 14th overall isn't terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible. What we're really hoping for is for the Rangers to kind of rally, and I believe the first round pick that is the conditional one, the conditional second would be a 2023 pick. So that's the one I'm more concerned about this year. I think the Jets will still land a pretty decent prospect, but all the stuff that happens next draft cycle, I think is really where Winnipeg could do a lot of damage and get some really great stuff in return to start setting up their longer term picture. Now, that is for now the main thoughts that we have about the draft coverage. We'll give you some more thoughts as we move on throughout this offseason. But before we go any further and talk about the current NHL playoff picture, I do want to shout out the wonderful folks at rockauto.com. If you've ever used an online auto parts store or even a retail brick and mortar store, you'll often find that it's hard for them to keep up with stock because you've got an increasing number of makes and models, and it's impossible for a lot of auto parts stores to stock exactly what you need. Why endure waiting in line at a retail store when you're just waiting for a store clerk to basically place the order for the item that you could have gotten at home? Instead of wasting time and money, you should make your first stop rockauto.com. You could save hundreds of dollars on the same parts and get really great stuff, or even the same exact part for a lot less. They have an example of like a Honda Odyssey fuel pump that's around $350 on a retail store. They offer it for around $215, which is just crazy savings, right? But as convenient and affordable as rockauto.com is, they're really a family-run business. This is a group that you really want to support because they've been supporting DIYers like yourself for over 20 years. They've got great customer service, rock-bottom prices, and a really great selection that you're just not going to find anywhere else. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com right now. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. We are taking a look around the league at the current playoff picture. We've had a couple of games finish. Just now, I believe LA versus Edmonton has resolved. We're going to check in on the result. I myself am not entirely sure who actually won this game, but obviously the series that we have ongoing, there's been a lot of upheaval, a lot of surprises. It's been very chaotic, and honestly, I really can't predict how a lot of these are going to end. The only series that we know for sure is, like we had on yesterday's episode, Colorado versus Nashville, in which the Preds ended up getting swept. So we've got some really fun updates to follow in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, just wanted to say again, thank you so much for choosing to make Locked On Jets as your first listen of the day. While you're at it, I highly encourage you to check out our Locked On Now program. This is a great way for you to find out what is going on around the league. They've got nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. Locked On Now is a very special program because no one else is really doing it the way we do it. We've got really short, digestible, bite-sized pieces that always gives you the most important takeaways, no matter what it is, whether it's a game, a trade, a really big rumor, some team news. Whatever it is, we've got your back with local updates from our host of Lock On Local Experts. So give them a follow and a subscription. It's free. We really appreciate your support, and we want to keep you in the loop on the NHL action that matters to you. Now, moving on, it is obviously time for some really cool updates. Yeah, the playoffs, I think, for a lot of people, it's been a bit of a surprise, right? You've had some pretty crazy results. Game 5 for the LA Kings and Oilers, like I said, just concluded, and LA ended up winning 5-4. But before we get into that game, which was honestly pretty crazy, I want to save that for later because I thought that one was absolute dynamite. We first got a couple of games that weren't so close. Carolina ended up defeating Boston 5-1. Like I said, I felt that the Bruins have put on a pretty decent showing, especially at home. but I still feel like, Carolina ultimately is going to be the team to prevail in this series. Um, it might go the full 7 games. I don't know. I think if it does end early, the earliest I would see it is game 6. Well, I mean, obviously it has to be, right? Game 6, because they're already at a 5 games into the series. But um, I do think Carolina is going to have to go the full 7. I think Boston is going to win game 6 and force a chance here for maybe a series upset. It's been really tough for them to generate offense. Even when they're getting lots of shots on goal, guys like Taylor Hall have been kind of quiet. At times, Bergeron and Marchand, while generating dangerous chances, they're not actually converting. Pasternak, he's done about as much as he can, but the depth scoring definitely kind of absent, and I just feel like this Canes team, it might be a little bit too much for them to surmount without some really great saves and some luck. And I don't know that Swayman is entirely up to that. I think the Bruins have gotten pretty decent mileage out of this roster, but I think asking for more is probably unrealistic. Um, the other series that wasn't super close tonight was St. Louis versus Minnesota. The Blues have taken a very big series lead, and the Wild, I was kind of hoping would put on a really good show this postseason. I think they've given us brief spurts of being a very strong roster and a team that can compete at an extremely high level, but the regular season success, I did feel there were some minor caveats to it, and I think we're seeing that now. In this game, basically, it was Kirill Kaprizov and, basically no one else for the Wild. The Blues kind of ran over a lot of their depth players, and I felt like even though Minnesota was getting into some decent positions, Jordan Binnington kind of stopped a lot of it. I felt like they weren't really actually taking the shots that they needed to score, and so the Wild are going to have a really tough time. They have a chance of being eliminated on the road against the Blues, which I think St. Louis probably finishes it in Game 6 when they go back home. I just don't really see a way for the Wild to claw back into this unless the Blues really implode and have a horrible home game. But if I'm being honest, I don't expect that to be the case. Now, we do have 2 series that I think are a lot more interesting and really dynamic. We're going to get into those in just a little bit. But before we go any further, I do want to shout out the awesome folks at Built Bar. If you've heard me talk about Built Bar before, you know that I'm personally a very big fan. Uh, summer's coming up, and if you're looking for like the perfect snack, a guilt-free candy bar-like thing that tastes awesome and has amazing flavors like churro puff, raspberry dark chocolate, banana cream pie, well, Built Bar is for you. Whether you need to stuff something in your kid's backpack, take something before your gym workout, or even have a nice wake up in the morning instead of like a really sugary protein bar, candy bar, what have you in the morning, Built Bar's there for you. They've got some amazing flavors, and if you can't decide on just one, they've got a mixed box so you can choose a new favorite. You get 12 different bars, so you can sample a huge variety of their lineup, and you can choose your personal favorite just from giving them a nice little chance. And really, I have to say, they do actually taste like candy bars. They're coated in 100% real chocolate, and they've got a soft, chewy interior. Those flavors I mentioned before, I personally highly recommend the raspberry dark chocolate. I think that is personally one of my favorites, but you really can't go wrong with any of them. No matter what flavor profile you're looking for, Built Bar's got something tailor-made just for you. If you're interested in getting a start, you might be asking, are they good for you? The answer is a resounding yes. They clock in at around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So go to built.com right now and be sure to use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. This is really a no-brainer. It's healthy for you. It tastes great. What are you waiting for? Just go check out Built Bar right now. And again, be sure to use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Hello, friends. Welcome to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. We are wrapping up our thoughts on 2 games that had some really crazy results for the playoffs. The first one was Toronto versus Tampa Bay. This has been a very pendulum swinging series. Each team seems to alternate one really great game with one absolute horror show. This time, we didn't really see that. It was more even and back and forth, I would say. And, Tampa Bay came out, really swinging and showing off some great scoring prowess. They took an early 2-0 lead, I believe it was. Toronto then scored a goal to cut the deficit, and all of a sudden, Toronto started waking up at around the halfway point. And once the Leafs started skating and really getting after Tampa Bay, the Lightning started making really bad defensive errors. And before you knew it, the Leafs had a 3-2 lead. You thought, oh wow, Tampa is in trouble. Austin Matthews clicking, William Nylander clicking, just a really fast, great puck moving cycle. Even guys like Ilya Mikheyev were creating really good chances. I thought Lyubushkin, despite having some notable errors, had some really good central slot drives that created chaos down low. So if the Leafs want to kind of ground and pound their way, they can do that. They've also got excellent perimeter skating and puck movement. Whatever way you want to see them dissect an opponent or just bang and crash down in the slot area, they can do both with relative ease. Uh, Things did get a little bit hairy briefly because Tampa Bay then tied it, about a minute and a half later. Obviously, like I said, a game with a lot of twists and turns, but Toronto ended up getting the late game winner very late, almost towards the end of the regulation period in the third. And so, yeah, Toronto, I think, is in a good position to win the series on, I guess it's going to be Thursday. Um, I don't know if they're actually going to be able to pull it off. I mean, it's a lot to ask, right? Tampa Bay at home, is a really tough opponent. Lightning are starting to figure it out, but defensively they're very shaky, and I think that for Toronto is what they want to see. If the Leafs can be worried about anything, it's that maybe Jack Campbell wasn't as sharp tonight. I thought he had a couple of goals that they weren't really great. And Tampa Bay is one of those teams where if you make a single mistake, it ends up in the back of your net. So that probably does concern them, but I think if any team has to be worried right now, it's got to be the Oilers. They just finished their game against the LA Kings, and after an insane comeback from a 4-2 deficit to tie it 4-4 right before the end of regulation, they lost in overtime. And you look at the Oilers and the way that they played, and it was basically down to McDavid and Draisaitl just sort of going ham for like 30 straight shifts. Other than that, the Oilers were kind of listless. This team kind of got outskated and outplayed by LA for most of the game. So when you look at the scoreline, honestly, it was very deserved in favor of the Kings. Uh, the only reason that it was close was because McDavid and Draisaitl just sort of did them. I mean, those guys together are dynamite. Part of the problem, though, is that when you combine them, you take away from other lines. And I think the lack of depth scoring and ability, it's not been as bad this year. This year was probably one of Edmonton's strongest offensive outputs in recent memory. But even still, in a series like this, you just can't really afford to have any of your depth players slacking like it's been a problem in the past. So, yeah, the Oilers, they're in real trouble. This was their home game, game 5. Now they have to go back to LA and try to win. If they just try and spam McDavid and Draisaitl, maybe they can get through, but gotta be honest, I would not want to put all of my bets on Mike Smith and the depth scorers for the Oilers against a Kings team that has seemingly found answers at almost every turn. So, very tight series, a very interesting one, probably one of the ones that I found to be the most fun to watch because it's just super chaotic. Everything is happening all the time. Uh, if you have a chance to check it out, I know it's like a really late game. It's always the latest one on the schedule, but seriously, you got to watch one of them. I think you'll have a blast, and as a neutral observer, I love it. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that series and any other playoff series you've been watching, or maybe you have some thoughts on Winnipeg's 14th overall draft pick. Be sure to let me know at AJ Living Loco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. I might talk about some of your thoughts on a future episode of the Locked On Jets podcast. So, again, get your feedback in. Leave a comment on YouTube down below in the comment section if you are watching this. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for choosing to make Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. Like I said earlier in the show, we'll have more playoff coverage and eventually some draft profiles and prospects. I've got to do some watching myself. Haven't been watching it as much, but tonight we're actually going to see the Manitoba Moose go back to work and hopefully salvage this best-of-5 series against Milwaukee. You'll get some thoughts about that game on Thursday. Hopefully I report a win and not a series sweep. But while you've made our show your first listen, I highly recommend you also check out Locked On NHL and make them your second listen. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your favorite podcasts, so give them a follow and a subscription right now. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.